My Gavanan Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Arachir Galadirthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to Divide and Conquer with another developer diary to encompass all of the changes to Gundabad over the past month, I think, since the last one, and just general changes across the map and to certain factions. So I'm just going to go down them in what will seem like in completely random order because I have copied and pasted them from our change log, and so they are in chronological order, but that does not mean they're grouped. So we might be jumping around. So to start with some minor changes to the map, previous regions that used to have restrictions in terms, and by that I mean they couldn't upgrade the towns, so they were locked at villages or they were locked at town level. Most of those restrictions are gone. So the towns in Mirkwood that were restricted, there were a few, they've lost their restriction. Dagolad can now be upgraded, no trouble, there's no restriction there. And Gund also, interestingly, had a restriction and no longer does. So the only towns now in the whole game that cannot upgrade, unless they're custom settlements, are Sackville, Deep Hallow, Hobbiton and Mitchell Delving. And additionally as well, Bree, because it is a custom settlement and we want to keep the customness. So otherwise they have all gone. Minor point, Gundabad is now called Mount Gundabad and no longer just Gundabad on its own. So there's a little bit of a name change there. Speaking with Gundabad, I'll try and group all of those together. The Avengers Guild, which they get and recruits their Avengers units and gives some of their unit Dwarven-inspired armour, is now only available in Khazad-dûm East and West, Thorin's Halls all the way over here, Thorin's Halls and Faham Gathol, Kirig Gathol over by Erebor itself, of course, and then Dane's Halls and Basra Dûm. So it is not available in Gundabad, that's the big point. It is not available in Rakjeberg, Witherboard, or Rook-Skibil, the new region there, which we'll talk about in a second. So the Avengers are much harder to come by. Additionally, minor points, which doesn't make too much difference because you've not played or tested with it, but they are much harder to get before the barracks event as well. But Daintools being the only place that trains them, if you get the Avengers Guild there, and you'll only get one unit of Avengers before the barracks event now, as opposed to 3. So they've been slowed down a bit. Speaking of Gundabad and their recruitment as well, the Snaga units are now only available once you capture Goblin Town. So once you've got Goblin Town, you can train them no trouble, and if you lose Goblin Town after taking it, you won't lose the Snaga. But it does mean that at the start of the game, you need to rely on your elite and costly units to get you through, as you won't have any trash unless you take Goblin Town, which you will note has a large garrison. So that is quite a fight before you can get any trash, which is another way to kind of hinder Gundabad and make them not feel like other orc factions. And of course, you will note perhaps the biggest change is Rook-Skibil has been added, and I'll cover that one in a moment. It does pertain to Gundabad, but it is in with a group of many much bigger changes to the map, so I'll talk about it there instead, but do note that we'll discuss that in a second. Gundabad now has a proper family tree, one of the few orc nations that actually does, and you'll be pleased to note that we have included historical accuracy in the family tree. Where do I go for family tree? This one. So, at the moment, your faction lord is Mazog, who is the fictional son of Bolg, who died peacefully in 2941 of the Third Age, of course, at the Battle of Five Armies. Bolg's father was Azog, who died in 2799 at the Battle of Azanulbazar outside of Moria. And so they are now represented. We've extended the family tree as well to suggest that Mazog has a brother called Hazolg, and that his son, the heir, is Marauder Chief Gerzog. But in addition, Azog, we've given him a fictional daughter called Bolgla, going along with Bolg and Bolgla. Boring naming convention, but there we are. She married someone called Ishmog, or rather paired with someone called Ishmog. I doubt they have marriages in Orc society. And they had a son called Zolg, who then paired with Delosha and gave us Bol's Mug. So you've got 4 generals at the start, and all in the family tree. Or one of the generals has not come of age, so Bol's Mug is obviously only 10, and those are the images for the orcs as well. Though fortunately they were already in the file, so I didn't have to actually get them. But so that's a female orc, and that's a orc boy not yet come of age. And then obviously Azog kind of does make his way into the game, but only partially. It's not a full homage to him, or rather it is an homage to him rather than being a full representation. So that's the family tree. But a point on the family tree, in order to make Azog and Bolg have the accurate death years, we had to extend the life of every character in the entire game. So 225 is now the oldest a character can live to. But humans get old age a lot earlier than most other factions. So at least a 200-year-old human is not going to be as fighting fit as he was when he was 18, for example. But unfortunately, 225 now is the oldest that characters can live till, in order to accommodate Azog and Bolg. A minor change, I like these little changes, but they mean very little to many of you, I should imagine, but Dol Vorn has been edited so that roads around the region will now connect to all of the surrounding towns. So you can now actually have a road that runs through Harlinden, and you don't have to now cross that vast expanse of nothingness very slowly. And your roads will also connect to Basradum, Corwillishar, and down to Bregost. So that's a nice connection for Dol Vorn, which makes the map look a bit nicer. A big change to all towns for all factions is that the Baluster Tower building has been removed from the game. It can no longer be built by anyone anywhere. And instead, by now merely upgrading your town, you will get Baluster Towers for free. They are now included in the town upgrades. Now do note that Baluster Towers unfortunately do not seem to work on custom settlements unless the creator of the settlement went out of their way to add them, and in most cases they did not. So a lot of places just do not get Baluster Towers even if you want to add them in, because you have to really edit the battle maps files directly to add in the Baluster Tower, and most of them just didn't do it. So the factions that actually get Baluster Towers really are Gondorians, Northmen, so obviously Dorwinion and Dale. Their towns get Baluster Towers. Any Eastern, what is Middle Eastern, but in our game is Evil Men towns, so Rune, Harad, and Khand. They will get Baluster Towers. Umbar will get Baluster Towers. Obviously, Dol Amroth, Rohan. Orcs will never get Baluster Towers. Their towns just do not upgrade to get them. Similarly, Dwarves will not get them, and neither will Elves, because all of their towns are technically custom towns, even though they're not in one location only. They are created by modders, and none of them have Baluster capabilities. So it is it's not a nerf to anyone, because of course previously you had to build Baluster Towers and you might have built them thinking you're going to get them, and then you never did, but you just maybe never realised. But it indirectly, I suppose, buffs the factions who actually do get them. But that is coupled with as well the fact that towers themselves now are considerably more deadly on the battle map. They are far more accurate, they fire quicker, they fire more arrows, and they do more damage. The accuracy is the thing that has changed them to be actually quite effective. So they're still not going to win the game for you, and they cannot be considered an additional unit in your garrison. But they are better. And so attacking a town now will result in quite a few casualties. And that's just a point to note. I wanted to make the towers more effective. I didn't want to add boiling oil because that is ridiculously overpowered. But I brought the towers in line so that it's actually a bit dangerous attacking a town. In addition, Gundabad's bodyguards have now been set up, so if we copy get all these guys out, they've all got custom bodyguards, and you'll also note that they've got a nice custom strategy map models, except for the faction leader. So Warlord Mazog comes with Pale Uruks, your elite late game Uruks that have their design inspired by the Hobbit films. So that's him. Your heir, Marauder Chief Gerzog, comes with Orc Avengers, and you'll note that they are a formidable unit, and he's probably going to be your most useful general. And then your faction leader's brother, Hazolg, comes with Archers, Black Shield Archers. So those are your three custom bodyguards now. And as I say, they've all been kind of winterified, so that you stand out a bit more on the campaign map when you're just looking for your army, which is a nice addition as well. So then the region changes, big changes going along. First and foremost, Eisenmouth has been cut from the game and a fort now sits where it used to. Eisenmouth has been moved here to the Emin Muil, and the new town name is Dant Alad, south of Dor Norhak. Which, if you were interested, means... Oh, I wrote the name just the other day and I've already forgotten it. It comes from Galad and fall. I think it means light fall. Is the name that I was going for. because, of course, Gil-galad actually died on the slopes of Mount Doom, but I thought it would be giving a town a name in reference to the fact that he died attacking in the Dagorlad and then onto Mount Doom. Although now I think about it, it's absolutely miles away, but it makes no odds because no one will A, remember that, or B, be able to translate that. So Dandalad is the name and Emunwil is the region. So Dor Nohak is no longer huge, and now there's a bit of a buffer between the forests and Mordor when you're fighting Dol Guldur. There's also some minor region changes around here. Logarth, which was in those trees, has been moved to the other side of this river, and the region border is now the river, so Bur South, this is a bit bigger. And in addition, Caras Kalayanen has been cut from the game, which used to be a region here. Its region's borders have been given to Ostgelon, so it's now in eastern Nemeriador, and that is the region that has become Rukskibil in the north there, to give Gundabad a bit more oomph. They've gained a dwarven castle. So those are the core region changes dotted around. You will also have noted that Estelad has been moved north, and it has been made a castle. It is no longer a town. It is a stronghold. And the pass that used to go up north of Cirith Ungol to Durthang has been closed off. So these two are now far more defensive than they were before, or specifically Cirith Ungol is now far more useful than it was before, because it actually now defends the plains of Gorgoroth rather than being able to be attacked from 3 different directions. So it makes it a bit easier for both a Mordor and a Gondor player. There was a slight change in borders for Garth Helagoth as well, as it gained some territory on the south there. Additionally, Brakiberg has now been made slightly smaller, and Bjornshals has been boosted up north there to take in that fort. So that's another change just there. And there's also been some changes to Matraith over here, which has been moved slightly further north and more central in this region, and it's claimed some land over from Feodor and Koloniak. So just minor little jumbles up. It makes it a bit more in line now with the road. So from Royal Tharbad up through to Bree is now a bit more of a straight line, which is a bit better. And Bruenost as well. I'm not sure I've spoken of Bruenost. I can't remember if I did. Well, anyway, Bruenost used to be here. And forgive me if I've discussed this before, so I'll do it only in brief. It used to be there. It used to be called Dol Bryn. But its region was given back to Camath Bryn and broken also up into the Etten Moors. And it was moved south here to give the Goblins of Moria a bit more land to conquer before they meet an enemy. And the town of Bruenost, obviously because it's on the River Bruinen, and so it is literally just Bruinen town. And it's been moved over slightly further to the mountains so that you can't walk between Fenestruinen and Bruenost in one go, which you used to be able to do. Camath Bryn has also been moved up from the river to a more central location and now sits on the hills above the forest rather than in the forest, which I much, much prefer. Morvatarth has also moved to the eastern side of this river rather than being on the western bank, which again favours indirectly the goblins because they can get to it a bit easier, but it makes very little difference in practice. And finally then, the last campaign map change, which again I can't really show you anything related to it, so I'm just flitting around. But the Dunedain have been given a new barracks building. Oh, sorry, this is the penultimate thing. So the Dunedain recruitment, of course, in Eriador they get a Dunedain encampment and it trains Dunedain units. Outside of Eriador they get a militia encampment and it trains the Beacon of Hope recruitment system units. So all of the human units you can get dotted around the world come from the militia camp, and it also trains the Sworn Cavalry and Sworn Archers, which is the new names of the old militia captains and militia cavalry. However, there is now a third tier of the militia building, which allows you to train Cardolan, Ruodawa, just Cardolan and Dunedain units anywhere in the world. But the third tier of this building requires the 5th tier of the blacksmith to have been built, and it requires upward of 75% Dunedain culture before you can train the Dunedain or Cardolan units. You cannot train the Arthedain units outside of Arthedain. They will remain completely AOR to these 4 or 3 or 5 regions throughout the entire game, because most factions have their elites AOR in some way or another, and so it seemed foolish to give the Dunedain access to their absolutely finest unit the world over. So the Dunedain are no longer fully restricted to Eriador where they were before, but they are still really very heavily restricted because the requirements to build this third tier of the barracks are very, very high. so you won't get them that often. But the final point to say before we jump over to the battle map and look at some unit changes is for Bree. Bree have been changed in how they recruit units. A massive change, actually, a huge deviation. They no longer have access to a barracks, archery range, or a stables. And instead their units have been spread out amongst the standard economic buildings. So, Bree's merchant units now come from the market, their greenway units now come from roads, their watchman units now come from the blacksmith. So they've been divvied out amongst economy buildings, as I say. A sidebar to this is that merchant units are now no longer available in castles, but greenway units are now available everywhere to make up for that deficit. And finally, something that has not been done but has been talked about literally about 10-20 minutes ago, just before I started recording this video, is that the Shire units are going to be changed, and the Watch, Sheriffs and Hobbitry in Arms are going to be merged into a single unit, and the Banderbrass Archers and Shire Militia are going to be merged into a single unit. And Bree are going to get 2 new units, namely Breeland Labourers, who are going to be a Javelin and Shield defensive unit that come from either the Siege Workshops or the Masons Guild. We haven't decided yet. And they will also then get an elite merchant unit that is going to have a 2-handed mace, and that is going to come from the Trade Routes building. Which is interesting because the trade route building requires that both roads and a market have been built, which means in order to get to this trade route building, you've got to have access to greenway units and merchant units. So the premise of this unit is that they are greenway warriors wearing merchant armor. That's basically the idea. And they're going to have a 2-handed mace and be armor piercing. I think Breeland are now going to be perhaps one of the nations who have the most armor piercing units of any nation. But I'm actually very happy with that, because Bree needs something that gives them a bit of an edge, because otherwise they are really one of the worst nations in terms of melee ability. So that's some changes to Bree. Hopefully I can show you them in the next developer diary, these new units, but I just wanted to talk about them there. So I'll jump into the battle map and show you some units, and then I've got some new city maps to show you, new unique battle maps to show you, namely Anon Enerod has been given a new map, and as has Roscabel over there, and as has one other that I can't see because it's not on the screen on the right where I've written my list, but we'll go there when we go there. But for now we'll jump over to the battle map and I'll show you all the changes that we've done there. Welcome then to the battle map so that we can have a look at the changes that have gone on here. And Gundabad again is the primary focus, and we shall start with them. Now first and foremost, Gundabad have been given new UIs, or rather they've been given UIs. So there's images along the bottom there as you can see, and if we just pause it, there's also the bigger images there as well. So there's obviously the faction is taking shape. You'll still note that the banner carriers are still Silver Surfer, but Hummingbird is working on those. He's getting his images all set up and ready for what he's going to use for them. So that's the first change. The second is that they've all been given voices. And the Black Shield units, however, are going to be redone because the quality comes out a bit bad in the game. I can play you them and you can see what you think.
Black Shield Warband. Warband.
See there, it just goes a bit fuzzy on the warband.
Warband on your orders.
But otherwise, I do quite like it. But they've all got voices, so I'll let you go through. These are the Snow Orcs.
Grab your spears. Snow Orc spears. Spears. Grab your spears. Spears.
There's the Snow Orc Spears. These are... they're not... God, don't have a voice. These are the Orc Avengers.
Show me the enemy. Show me the enemy. My axe is hungry. Show me the enemy.
Showing you the enemy is their main goal. The other one that may be re-recorded is the Half Trolls because it's sped itself up a little. And also, the Half Trolls have a new design as well. So have a look and a listen as we scan over the Half Trolls.
Half Trolls. What do you want? Half Trolls. What do you want?
Very, very basic lines reflecting the fact that they're supposed to essentially be, and for want of a much better, less, or perhaps more PC word, they're supposed to be stupid. So they have a voice that kind of reflects that.
Half Trolls.
and that they don't say much. But this is also what half-trolls look like. And you'll note that... I should have put them next to a unit so that it's a bit more visible. Oh, there you go. They're next to the captains. They are quite tall in regards to the other units in the roster, so they do stand out in that aspect. And they're kind of a mishmash meeting between Pale Uruks and half-trolls of Harad in their design. But I think they look cool. The Pale Uruks is my favourite voice. I hope you've had an opportunity to read their backstory, because the voice, I think, goes along with it perfectly.
You have orders? Pale Uruks. Your command? Your command? Pale Uruks.
They have one more line, which I prefer the most.
Speak.
That one. So those are the Pale Uruks. So anyway, so those are the voices throughout for the units. The reason I've got them all lined up is because there's some visual changes. So the black shields on the left here have no armour, and the black shields on the right here have dwarven mail, courtesy of the Orc Avengers Guild. So you'll note that most of the units in the battalion then wear dwarven mail, scavenged from the Avengers Hall, and some even have dwarven helmets. Which is a good addition. And also, as you can see there, some have dwarven shields. So it's a really subtle change. It's not smacking you in the face that they have dwarven armour, but it's just a nod to the fact that they've scavenged armour from enemies. Similarly, the same thing is happening here with the Snow Orcs. So the Snow Orcs on the left are normal Snow Orcs. That is what they look like. And then the Snow Orcs on the right have some dwarven mail again. Some very, very basic dwarven mail. So it isn't all that noticeable with the Snow Orcs, but it's a lot more noticeable with the Black Shields. And then the Pale Uruks are also going to get the same treatment, and they will actually just have dwarven heavy mail, dwarven plate, sorry. So they'll look an awful lot like Avengers when they get their upgrade as well, because there are the Orc Avengers over there. So there's some changes in regards to the Avengers Guild. And Bolg's champions, of course, now also have a new look inspired by the gentleman standing behind them, the Pale Uruks. They now conform in terms of armour. So you've got two units that are very much inspired by the Hobbit films, which themselves are based entirely off of Isengard armour from the first trilogy. So if you're wondering why, gosh, they look an awful lot like Isengard, I would encourage you to actually go and look at promotional material for the Hobbit film and see how much they just literally ripped the units out of Isengard, decoloured the armour a little so it was grey rather than black, and then put it in the film. It's quite disappointing when you see it actually laid out. But also the bodyguard now has been changed, so their armour looks an awful lot better. They're no longer just brown, just a brown blur on the battle map. And they now have two-handed scimitars as their unit weapon, rather than sword, spear and shield, giving them a bit more of a regressive theme, and also lining them up with the bodyguard of Bolg as described in the Hobbit book, who are said to wield large, deadly scimitars into battle. So the bodyguards reflect that. So that's the Gundabad changes. Now we come over to, I think, Dunland. No, Angmar. You may note in the Angmar overview I suggested that the Hillman and the Goblin Band performed almost identical roles, except one was more expensive than the other. And so in light of that, the Goblin Band has been taken away. Angmar no longer train Goblin Band, and instead the Hillmen are now their first early tier trash spears, but they have been boosted in stats slightly to make up for the fact that they cost much more than the band did. So Goblin Band are now unique, or not unique, but they are only for the Goblins of Moria, and the Hillmen are now the earlier tier unit for Angmar. So that's Angmar. Coming over to the next unit, we have the Northern Dunedain, because the Cardolan Archers and Cardolan Swordmen have been merged into a single Cardolan Sentinel unit that you can see charging at you in very slow motion here. So they have the same stats as the two units had for their each respective weapon, but combined into one. So they're just very good all-round archers now, as opposed to a good archer who's bad in melee, and a good melee unit that has no ranged component, to now just good archers who's good in melee on the follow-up. So Cardolan Swordmen have been cut from the game, and the Sentinels take their place. The unit on the right is upgraded with armour, so you can see they have mail, or I don't know, whatever you history buffs. Whenever I call out a specific type of garment, I'm always told that I've said the wrong thing. So I just don't say them now, to be honest. But on the left they're unupgraded, and on the right they are upgraded. So that's the Northern Dunedain. Away to their north are Dale and the Iwothiadar Horse Guards, who, have, as you can see, have been given a bow. So they retain very much the same stats in melee that they had when they were pure melee cavalry, but they now have bows to make up for it as well. So Dale's got a cavalry archer. And again, I included an upgraded and an unupgraded version, but I'm fairly certain they are identical in terms of how they look. Yes, they are. So that makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. And over here, now we have Dunland. Yes, the early tier javelin unit, I think they were called Dunlanding Huntsmen. Yes, they have been cut from the game and replaced with an early tier pike unit. Of course, to reflect the fact that Dunland's main enemy are cavalry, they would have pikes as a focus. In conjunction with this, and I haven't included them because I think I've said it before, Enedwyth lost their late game pike unit, the Moot Pikemen, and they became a two-handed berserker unit. I'm sure I showed them off in a video before. So these Dunland are now the pike focusing faction, and Enedwyth don't really have pikes at all, I don't think. So just a little bit of a jumble up between the wild men. Now there is one last thing on the battle map to show you before we jump into the towns though, so I'll cut away for a brief second and return with some ranger discussion. So then, to discuss rangers, they have all been adjusted. It was in one of the episodes recently, one of the overviews, I think I was discussing how every ranger unit had the same stats and it seemed a bit foolish. And so we then put our heads together and thought about ways to improve the Rangers, but then about a few hours into this Ranger discussion, Hummingbird reminded us all that actually the Rangers do have variations in their stats, but we still, well, I still ploughed ahead with making them even more distinguishable. So every Ranger unit is now different in some sort of way, and I'm unable to show you the, obviously, stat cards here, because I can only show you the one for the nation that I control. And I can't show you, for example, the stats of the units over there because my units are too far away from them. So I am just going to have to talk it through, but that's okay, it's very minor anyway. So, starting with the Dunedain. The Dunedain Rangers now have the highest missile damage of any Ranger. As you saw there, their missile damage is now 8 instead of 6. They also inspire nearby troops, so those are the bonuses that the Dunedain get. Moving around this large circle that we have, next up are Baruthiel's Rangers. And Baruthiel's Rangers now have the highest defense skill and the highest melee. So they're a ranger unit that kind of walks the line between ranger and melee troop, in that, as you can see, their melee attack is now 9 instead of 7, as it was for my unit, which is the default. And their defense is 8 instead of 6. So they are slightly more, they're better in melee than the other rangers, but they don't get a ranged or archer bonus. Scooting along next, who I'm going to guess Athala, I think? No, Nimrodale, should have gone, they were bright blue. So then we come to the Nimrodale Rangers. They have been changed in that they now have the highest armor stat, denoted by the fact that they actually wear visible armor. So they have the highest armor stat. And they have slightly more men than most other units, but when I say slightly, I mean I think it's 5 or 6, so it's nothing severe. But they're the only ranger now that cannot hide anywhere. So they can only hide in forests, they cannot hide anywhere in the world like the rest of the rangers. So that's Nimrodel. Jumping over next, I believe we have Greenwood Foresters. Yes, we do. So first of all, they've been renamed, and they're called Greenwood Foresters. And they've been given massively... they've been given the biggest difference, sorry, to use the proper words. They're now the smallest in unit size. So where most rangers are 101 men per battalion, these now have 72. So they've lost 30 men, but they have the highest overall aggressive stats. So their melee attack and their charge and their range damage are very high, but there's only 72 of them. So they've been given a really aggressive theme, but reflecting the fact that there's not many of them. So that's the playoff for the Greenwood Foresters. So arguably they're the best ranger unit now, except there's 30 less of them than there are in the others. So I don't think they would actually win in terms of who is the best ranger. I don't think they'd come out on top. Cutting up over here, we have the Ithilien Rangers. The Ithilien Rangers have been given the highest accuracy and the most arrows. So they are now the most accurate ranger, and they have more arrows than any other ranger. And a really flavour point, because you'll barely ever get to use it, they actually now get a bonus against elephants. or more accurately, against Mumakil, denoting the really only thing we ever know about the Athelian Rangers, that they waylay a Haradrim party who are escorting the Mumakil north to the Black Gate. They get a bonus against Mumakil to reflect how much they destroy Harad in that little engagement. So those are the Athelian Rangers. There should only be 2 left, and the first is Athala Rangers. Yes, Athala Rangers have been now have the furthest range of any unit. And they run fastest. So they now run at 115%. They run at 115% as opposed to a unit that runs at 100%. Or they run 15% faster than everyone else. That's a better phrasing. Every ranger unit runs quicker than most units. All rangers run at 5% faster than everyone else, but the Athala run 15% faster than everyone else. And they have the furthest range. So very much a skirmishing unit, given that they come from the vast open plains of Ravanion. Everyone's going to squeal at me that the Nimrodel should have the longest range because they visibly have steel bows. And to you, I would say, tough. We can't make them too OP. And then finally we have Foresters of Haleth, who are also a ranger unit. One of the few ranger units who don't have it in the name. But Foresters of Haleth have been have largely unaffected in that they actually have lower melee, missile, charge and defense stats than every other ranger. But contrary to the Greenwood Foresters, there are 133 of them. So it'd be very interesting to see if that actually does... if the extra 30 men makes up for the fact that they are worse in every other stat across the board. The only thing they do not suffer is they do have the same range and missiles and accuracy as everyone else. So those are the Foresters of Haleth. So now every ranger is different to each other in one way or another, and this little video here finally settles it. The only other ranger that I think perhaps I've not included here, and I should have done, are of course Kamul's Shadow Rangers. And their distinguishing feature has remained unchanged in that they have poison arrows. So their arrows reduce the morale of anyone they shoot. And that is deemed enough of a change for them to not need any stat adjustments or anything. If you think there is a human ranger that I have missed off, then feel free to let us know. But do note that the Elven Rangers are not included because they have completely different stats anyway. So this is just human rangers. And the only one that I do find myself in almost agreement looking at the Nimrodel Rangers' giant steel bow. You think they should have some sort of bow bonus, but I'm happy to leave it really at an armour and a few more men. So anyway, so those are the Rangers. So now we'll jump into the last part of the video, which is just to show you 3 new city battle maps that you will get to play on. So I shall see you in a moment. Welcome then to the first of 3 new battle maps, and I've already actually said what they were. That was foolish because I was going to play the guess which one you think this is game, but given that I've already named 2 of them, I'm not sure you will. But feel free to have a guess before we jump in, and it is of course Roscobel, the little settlement in southern Anduin. This has been created by RK. And I think it is a wonderful little settlement, really. And in the centre there, of course, is his take on Radagast's house, which is a house with a tree growing out of it, which looks quite nice. It's a very simple settlement, as you can see. 2 gates, no real checkpoints, just a large open space, because that is really all it would be. But I think it's a wonderful little addition, as I say. Roscobel, if you're interested, is a Sindarin word, and it means brown village. Because Radagast lives there, or brown, like hovel or home. Think on it as you will. But there we are. So that's Roscobel, a new settlement. Now Roscobel is you can upgrade so that this settlement will then disappear. I think. I'm fairly certain. No, I think he might have locked all of them actually. So it may look like this for the entire game. I don't think it can be upgraded away from this. But anyway, so there's number 1, Roscobel. Welcome to number 2, and again I would invite you to have a little guess at what you think this is before we dive into it properly. You can see silhouetted against the sky there some goblins of Moria running up that little hill, and in the back there what appears to be an elven tower. And as we get closer you will note that it is of course the settlement of Anon Enorod, Gate of the Mountain, which is what that name means in English. Anon Enorod has been created by RK again, and he's taken to using something I fully approve of, which is assets from Battle for Middle-earth. So those of you who have played Battle for Middle-earth 2 will note that that is the building that the goblins upgrade their armour out of. That is the, I think, Mordor Orc Recruitment Centre. squeezed in the edges there. So those are Battle of Middle-earth assets. But you'll also see that it's got elven ruins dotted throughout. Because, of course, Anon Emerald is an elven town, and it is in the old elven province of Hollin, or Eregion. And so there's a few little ruins of elves, but otherwise it is just a standard orc encampment. Crappy walls, no towers, easily assailed, difficult to defend, as most orc encampments are. There's some meat lined up there. I think even these assets might well be from Battle of Middle-earth, if memory serves. Just as like the filler that dots around the world map. I don't know. There's a slight new texture for orc tents there, so they're not just blocks of black as they may have been in the past. But there we are. That's Anon Enerod. So this town, of course, is just to the west of Khazad-dûm. And it's got this nice little archery range hill thing, is what I assume that is, that allows your archers to line up and shoot down at those who would assault the city. So there we are. I also was using the Ardenium because we redid the voice clips for the Azrazair warriors. The Azrazair Marines, Raiders, Warriors, Archers, and Savages. But unfortunately, none of the Ardenium starting army has any of those units, so you can't hear their voice clips.
We are ready to strike.
So there is none others. And right, now we'll jump over to the final one, which I have not mentioned, so your guesses will actually mean something. Welcome then to the third and final new battle map for certain cities. And this one you can have a guess at. So there's a few key indicators of where this might be. Number one, of course, is the perpetual snow. Now, of course, you don't know that there's perpetual snow, but I'll give you that one for free. This battle map is always in the winter. Additionally, those of you who are familiar with Battle for Middle-earth 2, particularly its expansion pack, may well recognise the spires that are rising in the back there of the base, and in fact the gateway that stands before us. You'll see the enemy are actually currently arrayed atop the walls, and the town is held by the remnants of Angmar. And you may never have guessed it, but it is, of course, Litash in the far frozen north. And again, it's a very simple layout, but just looks really very good and adds some much needed variety to the game. So this odd sort of mountain curve formation, just a brief way away from the sheer drop of the mountains of Gundabad, is Litash's back border. This is the fortress from Angmar in the Rise of the Witch King expansion pack for Battle for Middle-earth 2. This is the mill for Angmar that produces their resources, and this is where the Dark Numenorians come from. The Hall of the King's Men. I think it's called the Hall. I think it is called the Hall of the King's Men. I don't know. That name seems lengthy. Anyway, there's another mill there, and those are the assets other than the wall. As I say, this is the gate and wall that is used on the Khazad-dûm battle map for Battle for Middle-earth. So all assets from Battle for Middle-earth. And again, a really simple town. 2 gateways. Only one of them actually has a wall. The other uses natural defences. It's always in winter, as I say. RK has also actually given the tents a proper winter theme. Something that some of you may be looking at and thinking, oh, brilliant. Because you may have recalled that these tents, when it was winter before, used to just be completely 100% white and all the same colour. There was no texture to them whatsoever. They were just bright white. And now they are actually just light grey, as if they've got a sprinkling of snow on them, and they are actually used daily and not left to be covered in snow. So those are the tents. And that is Litash. So Litash is now also unique, and it's got this cool cave-like suggestion at the back behind the town centre flags. So there we are. That's it. So those are all the developments that have happened since. I believe the last developer diary was around the end of August. So it's been about a month's worth of work. And all those changes have gone in and are all getting ready for whenever we release the patch that is going to be the Rise of Gundabad. In a break from tradition, I don't think we're going to number this version, and I think we will simply call it version 2.2 : The Rise of Gundabad. So it won't be 2.3 or version 3 or anything like that. So whenever the next version releases, which we're hoping to be, as again, sometime in maybe Q1 of 2019, it will simply be called 2.2 : The Rise of Gundabad. Just so that you're all ready and prepared for the name. But there we are. So that concludes this episode. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And until we speak again, dear friends, Navar Naden Perimad Melunin, and farewell.